All right, I think we should get started. We'll still, I'm sure, get a few more people, but I think I will start. So, well, first, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is truly a global audience. It's 10 o'clock here in Los Angeles, but we have quite a few Americans. We have Europeans where it's late in the afternoon. We have Indians, which we are really appreciative, who have come at 11:30 at night. And we even have a couple of Australians who are here at 5 o'clock in the morning. So thank you. This is very exciting for us to share something we've been working on for a number of years. The mission of the Center for the Digital Future is to really do work that can transform people's lives, to do first-rate research that can appear in academic journals, but to really do work that policymakers, governments, academics, journalists can use. And when Umberto Salpaso came to me with the idea of the GDKP, I thought it was exactly what our mission was about. I was not an economist. I was not able to really understand.
And I'm not talking about taking a shot of alcohol.
I'm actually going to mute people.
Olive oil.
If that's all right. I'm going to mute everybody. When Umberto came to me with the idea of the GDKP, I didn't have the economic background to evaluate where it fit into economic theory. He said he was going to take it to the government of India. And the government of India has now officially adopted it. You will hear from a number of Indians. This is now something we are ready to move forward with. We are not presenting to you completed plans. We're going to present our ideas. We want you to listen. Nobody will be called on. You are welcome to sit in the background and learn, although we hope in the question and answer period you may ask things. We're looking to recruit a network worldwide who wants to work with us on some of these things. But we really want you today to just learn, to listen and to learn. So we are enormously appreciative you are here. Our format is we're going to introduce the CEO of NITI, which I'll explain in a moment, who will speak by tape because of the late hour in India, but a number of Indians are here. After that, we will hear from Professor Salpaso, who will tell us about the GDKP and how it started and how it's planning to roll out. Then we will hear from a number of Indian and Italian ambassadors who will talk about their role in the GDKP. And then we will hear about from Jane Kagan some of the projects and some of the work that's being done. And then we will open it up to discussion. So thank you for being here. We have made the decision, normally I like to have audience comments as we go through, but it is now 11:37 at night in India, and I've promised the Indians we would get them on as soon as we can. So we'll take questions later, but please save your questions. And so let's get started. We are once again thrilled you are here. So let's start. When I'm still admitting people, I'm sort of playing a multitasking role as we do this. So let's start. When Prime Minister Modi took over the leadership of India, he wanted to put together a special group to administer and transform the economy in the country. And he created something called the National Institution for Transforming India, or NITI Aayog. NITI. And many of you in the invitation letter had heard from Dr. Rajiv Kumar, who is the vice chair of NITI. Prime Minister Modi is the chair. And today we would like to hear from the CEO of NITI, Mr. Amitabh Kant. And Mr. Kant not only is the CEO, this is a cabinet level position in India. India, the world's second biggest country and fifth biggest economy, which has now officially embraced the GDKP. And a very short bio, Mr. Kant is CEO of NITI. He's the author of Branding India, an incredible story, because he's been the key driver of the Make in India campaign, the Startup India campaign, the Incredible India campaign, which I think many of us know, and God's Own Country initiatives that positioned India as a leading manufacturing and tourism destination. Mr. Kant also conceptualized the Guest is God campaign to train taxi drivers, guides, immigration officials, and make them stakeholders in the tourism development process. He's the chairman of the committee to implement digital payments in India. He did his schooling from the Modern School in Delhi, graduating in economics from St. Stephen's in Delhi and at Delhi University. He has an MA from Nehru University and is a Chevening Scholar. I am delighted that he was able to put together a very brief welcome to us in today's meeting. So let me play that. That is the only part of our conversation today that is on tape. So let me go get that and I will open it up.
Thank you, Dr. Jeffrey Cole, Director, Center for the Digital Future at USC, for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts on GDKP and the work we are doing at NITI Aayog for GDKP India. India takes GDKP project extremely seriously, and NITI Aayog is convinced on its huge benefits and immense gain that will accrue not only for India, but also for the rest of the world, especially to the emerging nations and to the southern part of the world. Professor Sulpasso and Dr. Kumar have rightly identified the pressing need to capture the economic value of immaterial goods of a country in the form of knowledge. Not only traditional knowledge, but also the immense knowledge circulating in the cyberspace. We in NITI Aayog are pleased and were delighted when Professor Sulpasso insisted that India should be the first country to do it. With India's rich cultural, spiritual, scientific, archaeological, and innovative knowledge, and its unique heritage and its demographic size, all put together, there couldn't have been a better country than India to begin with the estimation of GDKP. We are moving ahead, though COVID, in manner of speaking, slowed us a little bit. But now we have our own vaccine and large program for vaccination underway. We've managed both lives and livelihoods, and we are confident that we can move much quicker and faster with vaccination moving forward. We will be delighted to share the knowledge with the rest of the world, especially in the countries of the South, because we believe that knowledge cannot be monopolized. I congratulate Professor Sulpasso for all the efforts behind GDKP and the Center for Digital Future for launching and facilitating GDKP Global. We are glad indeed to know that Sulpasso Institute of GDKP is doing phenomenal work. We wish this institute all success and all glory in future. I also congratulate all the organizations and individuals with a shared sense of urgency to effect the fundamental changes in the economic status quo and those that are part of the community of GDKP Global. I would like to end by saying that despite the current slowdown in the economy, Global economic experts see strong resurgence and long-term economic growth for India. Over the last few years, a number of structural changes have been announced by the government, such as implementation of goods and services tax, demonetization, insolvency and bankruptcy code, to minimize the leakages in the system, to encourage investments, to control inflation, and to build healthy, robust, and transparent ecosystem. The Indian economy has been going through a phase of healthy transformation. There has been unprecedented loss in economic activity caused by the outbreak of COVID-19. However, the government is taking speedy and rapid measures and taking efforts to boost the investment and bring the economy back on track. There have been a number of initiatives and schemes such as Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana and Atmanirbhar Bharat, that is self-reliant India. We believe that self-reliance means that India should be an integral part of the global supply chain. Global supply chains will relocate and India must be an integral part of this shift. The calculation of GDKP India will facilitate better allocation of resources, which helps in achieving resilient and sustainable growth of the Indian economy. With these few words, I conclude and thank you very much, Professor Sulpasso and ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
All right, a special thanks to Mr. Kant for making that tape available to us. And you've now, those who have read some of the materials have heard from the two top leaders of NITI, the vice chairman, Dr. Rajiv Kumar, who was in our invitation, and now Mr. Kant, the CEO of NITI. So let's get started. Everything else from here on is live. And let me, overseeing this whole GDKP project has been a group of four. Me, Professor Sulpasso, you'll meet Jane Kagan in a couple of minutes, and Archie Kleingartner, who will introduce Professor Sulpasso. Let me just say, Archie is a true legend in the University of California system. When I met him, he had the vision of founding the UCLA School of Public Policy. He was its first dean. He is a longtime professor of management at the Anderson Graduate School. He is also the elected chair of the UCLA Academic Senate, the highest position a faculty member can get. And he is a very near and dear old friend of Professor Sulpasso's. So Archie, if you will introduce Umberto, and you are muted. I muted everybody. If you can just unmute your mic, or I can, yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I am delighted, Jeff, to be able to do this. Professor Umberto Sulpasso and I have been friends and professional collaborators for, dare I say it, almost 50 years. Umberto was born and raised in Italy. He and his wife Bianca currently reside in Rome. 3 of his 4 children were born in the United States. Umberto's graduate training was primarily in business economics and included an MBA from Columbia University in New York. We met when I was still a young faculty member in the School of, what is now the School of Management at UCLA. Umberto, who was a good deal younger, was invited by the senior faculty to come to UCLA on a kind of postdoc fellowship. Still in his early 20s at the time, Umberto was invited to become part of the academic instructional staff of what was then known as industrial relations, but now referred more commonly as organizational behavior or human resource management. In the intervening years, Umberto returned many times to UCLA to lecture and work on research projects. He likes California and especially Los Angeles very much. So even when his work was in some other part of the country, he would try to make UCLA his home base until he returned to his family and professional obligations in Milan and Rome. Since his appointment as a fellow of the Center for Digital Future, Jeff Center, is housed at UCLA, he able to work in a truly bilateral way between UCLA and USC. To make ideas about domestic, Umberto has served as a full-time professor at several well-known universities in Italy and is always pleased to accept invitations to lecture and speak to student groups. But Umberto is a restless sort who resisted becoming a full-time career academic. He likes to engage with the real world, as we call it, and his real passion, as he once put it, is to make theory become alive. To make ideas like gross domestic knowledge theory, gross domestic knowledge product come alive is the theme of today's seminar. This quest has substantially occupied the past 6 or 7 years of Umberto's time. It is a big idea, it is a big project. The idea of GDKP is nothing less than to advance a new measure of the wealth of nations. The fact that we have reached the point of this conference this day is a tribute to Umberto's persistence, hard work, and vast creative powers. So let the program begin. I turn the microphone back to Jeff Cole, who will moderate the discussion with Umberto. Thank you.
Thank you, Archie and Umberto. I hope you are unmuted and ready to go. Are you? I need Umberto Salvaso. Well, I hadn't factored this in. Umberto, are you there? I think you're probably there and just muted. Let me look for you.
Or Bianca.
You are there.
Form.
Yeah, can you just unmute Umberto?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Oh, you're giving me heart palpitations for a minute. Thank you. All right, let's get started.
I was not here.
Let's get started. So Umberto, let's see what all the fuss is about. Let's talk about GDKP and your vision, and then we'll hear how others are reacting and implementing from it. But let's start. Tell us in everyday language, what's the difference between GDP, gross domestic product, and GDKP, gross domestic knowledge product, and why is the GDKP superior?
You will excuse me if I watch the screen, and sometimes I talk a little bit fast, but in order to listen to more people, I need to strictly be linked to the bracket time that was given to me by Jeff.
I've been very hard on Umberto on keeping him to time.
But I would start thanking Arch for your nice words, mostly undeserved. Thank you, Jeff, for your extraordinary efforts to make this wonderful meeting. And thanks to all participants for the great honor they make me to listen to the GDKP problem. I'm very grateful to the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. I don't know him personally, and I hope to meet him as soon as COVID will permit me to go to Delhi. But his government appointed me to direct the India GDKP calculation, the first GDKP in the world, the GDKP of the fifth economy in the world, and one of the most populated countries. This is an incredible honor. My good friend, Tom Plate, former chief of editorials of Los Angeles, wrote splendid books on giants of Asia. Modi is one of them, with the addition of democracy's giant. I'm very grateful to the CEO of NITI, the most important think tank of India, whose chairman is Prime Minister himself. We listened to his very important comments. He has set for me an office, secretary, staff, transportation, residents to make this wonderful innovation. Mr. CEO will do it well. I will mention later the very special role in GDKP India of the Vice Chairman of NITI, Dr. Rajiv Kumar. We will hear some people that played a key role in GDKP India. And for reason of time, we won't be able to hear some of them, but I want to mention them. First, Dr. Rama Kamaruji, my first chief assistant, a most brilliant and operational person. Then Ashish Kumar, one of the world's highest specialists in national accounting system, just back to our core team from United Nations. And then Dr. Hari Krishna Maram, CEO of a beautiful college in Bangalore, where he asked me to be president, and if I accept, I will set their GDKP India Media Educational Digital Center that we will have the role to manage. And finally, a special thanks to the last three Italian ambassadors to Delhi, Lorenzo Angioloni, Antonio Armellini, and Vincenzo De Luca. They all made great diplomatic work to support the GDKP. And now, Jeff, let's go very fast to your question.
Okay, once again, can you tell us in everyday language the difference between GDP and GDKP and why GDKP is superior?
We live in a very special time for knowledge. Every day, billions of people produce an exchange of knowledge, which is immaterial goods. But wealth of nation is still calculated as production of material goods. Joseph Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, is not like Henry Ford. He doesn't say you can have any car of any color you want as long as it is black. He says you can have anything you want, just let me know it, and I will deliver it to your door. Bezos is the richest man in the world, and he doesn't produce any material things, but GDP is still based on material production. 4 out of 5 of most valuable stock do not produce any material things, but GDP is still based on material production. GDP is dead and we keep it alive. We need to move from wealth of nation made just of production of material goods and learn how to include immaterial things. Climate, security, health, minority groups, even religion must enter into calculation of a wealth of nation. In other words, we need to calculate GDP of health, GDP of climate, GDP of minority group, GDP of culture, maybe GDP of religion. And the only way to do it is to use knowledge. We can do with GDKP. GDP is the result of material production. GDKP is the result of all economic interlocking immaterial factors.
And you know, Umberto, building on that, President Biden, who's been in office a week today, has said that climate change will be at the center of every governmental action and every governmental agency. So what is the formula for the GDKP? How do you assess or compile a nation's knowledge product?
The formula of GDKP is M times KI times V. M stands for mass of people that access to internet. KI, the knowledge items, old and new. Those traditional knowledge items, but also them created by all people. And V is the real novelty, is the velocity of circulation of any type of knowledge items. V of this formula make the great change in the nature of knowledge. That is why we have 2 GDKPs. We have IS International Standard GDKP, which is a traditional normal calculation along the system of GDKP, and NDM, National Digital Managed GDKP, to assess in quantitative terms the knowledge policy of one administration through coefficient of diffusion, amplification, and multiplication of knowledge.
And building a little bit on what you said earlier, why is GDKP a better economic measure than GDP?
Let's talk about growth. GDP doesn't provide an answer for dramatic modern challenges, climate, health, gender inequality, minority groups, but it has also technical limits, for instance, to measure the growth of economy. GDP can provide trends, but trends measure the past. They do not anticipate discontinuity factor, such as innovation, change in politics, change in political alliances. See what happened to China after Kissinger and Nixon opened the door of the Great Wall to American enterprise. China GDP has grown so much that it is now ready to surpass that of America. But it was not the logic of a trend to make that gain. In other words, for forecasting growth, we need to identify a multiplier factor. Two American presidents did it in occasion of great crisis, and they should be evocated today in this dramatic moment. Roosevelt, for challenging the Great Depression with the multiplier of deficit spending, used the multiplier of Keynes. But Kennedy, for challenging the space delay highlighted by Sputnik, he established NASA. For the Moon Project, NASA hired 35,000 knowledge operators and indirectly involved 300,000 workers in knowledge factors. That made America the knowledge strongest economy in the world. When GDKP will be calculated, the ratio GDP divided by GDKP will give K, the knowledge multiplier of a country, which I personally intended to call it Kennedy multiplier. Homage to Robert, who first attacked the limits of GDP, and homage to John, that made the most spectacular knowledge boost of an economy in all times.
So on this Zoom, on the 81 people on the Zoom, we have some college presidents, a number of very distinguished deans, academics, and I'm sure they are all interested. Have you presented your GDKP model at any highly regarded academic conferences, such as a meeting of the American Economic Association? If so, could you tell us? If not, why not?
No, I didn't present it. Why? I do respect academic conference, but I remember Kuznets, inventor of GDP, when all top academic schools strongly criticized GDP and rejected. Fortunately, one secretary of US government decided to go ahead. Good luck for all of us. Samuelson, in the late 90s, declared that GDP was the most important theoretical economic invention of the 20th century. Since knowledge is, for me, the right course of action, I decided to try first to convince an important country to adopt it, and then to present it with the support of top-level academic institutions to the academic world. I do hope that UCLA and USC will help me to do that.
And Umberto, you're Italian. I think that's pretty obvious to anyone who's listening. With strong ties to America, why India? Why did you go to India as the first country to measure the GDKP?
Well, I do love India very much. That's the first thing. It's an extraordinary country with the most ancient tradition of knowledge in the world. India is the only country where sacred books, Veda, mean knowledge. But there is also a strong economic challenge. India's enormous demographic element make the M of the formula, M times Ki, the most powerful potential in the world, like that in China. But different from China, the circulation of modern knowledge, V, of the formula, is not submitted to any limitation because India is a very democratic country, and therefore GDKP is potential much higher. But of course, after starting working, the great intellectual friendship made a decisive difference. Special role of Dr. Kumar, VC of Niti Aayog, former chancellor of the oldest Indian university, who immediately, in the first 30 minutes of talk, grasped the importance of GDKP for India. Great economist with incredible vision, his contribution of Indian economy structure for the matrices, which are the pillars of the actual calculation, will be the fundamental part of it. That is why GDKP India will be the result of what I call KNS model.
And lastly, Umberto, for all of us listening to you, what would you like from us? Why are you here and what are you looking for?
Well, this is a very long list, but I'll make it short. First of all, US government, I would like to adopt the GDKP USA. Second, I would like Silicon Valley would finance a world GDKP simulation software to be used in every country in the world. They know how to do it. Then I would like a great foundation would finance a sort of Noramink report. From stock exchange, I like them to establish a series of knowledge indexes for industry, for banks like Dow Jones. But they also provide an additional P to P ratio, the PK ratio of the listed stock. But then there is the most important thing I'd like to get. Since I'm convinced that Biden will be one of the best presidents, I would love to see him to promote an American Renaissance with K Silk Road and set a city of knowledge. Perhaps in New Orleans, because my love for jazz. Some of the best days I lived in America were spent in French Quarter near the house of Faulkner, sipping café au lait at the Dumont Cafe and listening jazz on the street and the Preservation Hall. But I would accept also a Biden city of knowledge in the Midwest with antennas, a sky connection directed to favor the circulation of knowledge all over the world. I hope your president will promote the birth of International Council of Knowledge among all nations of the world.
Thank you, Umberto. He seems to be off to a good start. We share your love of New Orleans. We would be happy to base an operation there. And of course, you'll be here through the whole session because I'm sure most of the questions will be for you. Now we would like to hear from a couple of ambassadors who will speak briefly. If Ambassador Fabian, if you can unmute your microphone. Let me introduce Ambassador KP Fabian as a member of the core group on GDKP appointed by NITI, which now everyone is well familiar with. He served in the Indian diplomatic service for 36 years before retiring as ambassador to Italy and permanent representative to the FAO and other UN organizations in Rome. He published Common Sense on War in Iraq in 2003, arguing there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Currently, he's professor at Symbiosis University in Pune and is on the guest faculty of the Geneva School of Diplomacy and International Relations. He writes on international relations, and his book, The Arab Spring That Was and Wasn't Very Timely, is getting ready for publication. Ambassador Fabian, if you can unmute and take the stage.
Thank you, Dr. Jeff Cole in LA, Caro Umberto in Rome, ladies and gentlemen interested in GDKP in LA and elsewhere. It is so good to be with all of you. As the night in Delhi is still young, it is hardly midnight. Now, Dr. Jeff Cole, thank you for that very cordial introduction. You mentioned about WMD. The actual expansion of WMD is not weapons of mass destruction, it is weapons of mass deception. That is what happened in Iraq. Okay, now, Dr. Jeff Cole, U.S. Center for Digital Future and Government of India are, what shall I say, aligned digitally. Why? We have a project, Digital India, with 3 key components. 1, digital infrastructure as a core utility for every citizen. 2, governance and services on demand. And 3, digital empowerment of citizens. Now, this program was launched by our Prime Minister in July 2015. Now, coming to GDKP India, Umberto's success in India reminds me of Julius Caesar, who once sent a message.
Hopefully it ends better.
Who once sent a message to Rome from a foreign country, Vini Vidi Vici. The only difference is that it has taken Umberto slightly longer than it took Julius Caesar. But I want to make a confession here without seeking absolution. When I was in Rome in the last years of the last millennium, Umberto persuaded me to enter a conspiracy to take GDKP to India so that India will be the first country to have its GDKP measured, just as the United States was the first with GDP. A few springs later, Umberto came to Delhi and he met Dr. Rajiv Kumar, and the two got along like a house on fire. Now, under Umberto's lead, the government of India, through its brilliant think tank, Niti Aayog, is engaged in moving as fast as possible, as you have already heard from the CEO of Niti Aayog, Mr. Amitabh Kant. Now, it is my experience when I speak of GDKP in the academia in India that if the interlocutor is young, then I am more likely to be able to convince the interlocutor of the importance and value of GDKP. The older interlocutors, either, not all of them, but some of them, either take time to understand what it's all about, or rarely, but it does happen, some of them just refuse to think adventurously. Now, caro Umberto, the present stage of GDKP reminds me of the immortal words of Victor Hugo. Nothing else in the world, not all the armies in the world, is so powerful as an idea whose time has come. Now, just as the decimal system came to Europe through Italy, circa 1300, it is of historical importance that GDKP should be coming to India from Italy with the support of the center in LA in America, where Columbus, an Italian, landed 2 centuries later. I had a then after we have done it in India, GDKP should go to the global south. So, dear Umberto, you should be prepared for a long voyage. Now, thank you, Dr. Jeff Cole, for extending to me the privilege and pleasure of this truly meaningful fellowship. I expect to see expanding cooperation between your center and India, not limited to GDKP. Maybe we will have the pleasure of seeing you in India sooner or later, sooner the better. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for lending me your ears so gracefully.
Thank you, Ambassador Fabian. Thank you for staying up so late. And thank you really for those inspiring words. Let's now turn to Ambassador Shetty, if you can unmute and make sure you are available. Ambassador Balkrishna Shetty is a member of the core group on GDKP India, also appointed by NITI. He served in the Indian Statistical Service from 1973 to 76, and in the India Foreign Service from 76 to 2010, with last appointment as Ambassador of India to Sweden and Latvia. During 2013 to 15, he was guest faculty in the Department of Mathematics at the Indian Institute of Information Technology in Delhi, teaching number theory. He's the author of the book, What is Mathematics?, which I wondered about in much of my time in school. So Ambassador Shetty, if you will unmute and take stage.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jeffrey Cole, Professor Sulpaso, all the distinguished participants. I'm very happy to have been invited because I think this is a subject which is of great importance. Importance not just in the sense of an intellectual adventure, but something which will impact humanity and the way it lives and consumes. Umberto has already spoken about what GDKP is really about, what it measures. And he also, of course, said why GDP is not adequate. In fact, why is GDP important at all? It is important not because it just measures the total value of goods and services during a particular period for a particular nation. It is what we can deduce from that. It tells us something about what's being produced in the country, what resources are being used, and whether those meet the goals of the country concerned. Obviously, in the last several years, and maybe decades, the external situation, global situation has changed. And these have made GDP more and more irrelevant. I use the word irrelevant because what has happened is, first and foremost, the Club of Rome told us what it means to consume. The planet Earth is a finite, and therefore the resources are limited. Imagine every family in the world living like a family in the US. What would happen? The amount of consumption, there would not be enough for the next generation. Number two, the pandemic has told us that you don't have to be present everywhere. You can do things virtually. We're even talking of avatars. We can attend a meeting without being there. We send our avatar away. Imagine how much fuel would be saved. Number three, I think this is very important. The pollution that is being caused by our consumption. All these are the result of a certain approach to life, and that is of production and heavy consumption to satisfy a certain ideas. The thing is, you can get those same things in a different way, and that is where GDKP comes in. Why? First and foremost, GDKP talks about knowledge. Knowledge is like the proverbial cake. You can have it and eat it too. If I have some knowledge, I share it with you, it remains. So it can be distributed to everybody without causing a burden, without having any limitations that Club of Rome talked about. Number two, knowledge, what Umberto talks about is not the knowledge of Pythagorean theorem or some abstract theorem in mathematics or in rocket science or something. It's the knowledge that people want, the common people want. This is not the knowledge restricted to universities, think tanks, advanced institutions. It is knowledge created by the people, for the people, and knowledge of the people. And therefore, it is really mass knowledge. And therefore, and it has no limitations of space, of time. Of space, because knowledge can be transmitted immediately. And when you do that, you don't emit any polluting gases. And lastly, knowledge is something which makes every human being a better person, hopefully. But Generally, the idea is you become much more than an animal from whom we descended. And therefore, it is this knowledge which is today dominating. When we talk of knowledge economy, which the World Bank has done, is nothing great. World Bank has spoken about it, which is that you have these new technologies which are and new products which are very knowledge intensive. But I think that is not what Umberto's main idea is. The idea is that knowledge is created by common people's economic interaction and which is grasped by this GDKP. And more the knowledge circulates, faster the knowledge is consumed, faster is knowledge regenerated because of the knowledge that is consumed. This is a win-win for the world and for the people. GDKP, therefore, is something, as Ambassador Fabian said, its time has come because we have reached the borders of limit of consumption. We've understood the impact of our consumption on the global climate. We have understood the impact of the barrier that we have because of misunderstanding. It is knowledge which can help create changes in understanding. And therefore, the knowledge which is being talked about is not theoretical knowledge. It's a knowledge which comes out of people's interaction, whether it's Facebook, whether it is on WhatsApp that I send a message, whether it's an email or something I buy, something I sell, something I advise. It is these type of knowledge which are increasingly dominating, and the purpose, and therefore the idea is how to capture this in a way which tells us the structure of the knowledge economy, how is it distributed, how can it be absorbed faster, and how can it be used to regenerate new knowledge. And I think this is where I have felt very impressed with Umberto's GDKP, and I see it as not something which is supplementing or replacing GDP. No, it is unique and stands by itself and is required today. Let me also tell you that I think Umberto was smart in selecting India. I'm not saying it because I'm an Indian, but because, as I said, there is a mass factor. The US, yes, US is about 332 million population. I think the latest, I think yesterday's population was that much. India is about 1.38 billion. It's a massive market. Number two, like US and other Western countries, India is an open society, so this information flows quickly, uninterrupted, unlike some other economy which may be bigger in mass, but restricted in terms of information flow. And I think it is in India that you will see, as I think Dr. Paul has already mentioned, Government of India is already onto the job. And I think it is here that we will see how we go about it. Let me also tell you that it's not necessary that we find the best model. After all of us who have done mathematics know that Leonard Euler proved various things in function without knowing what a function really is. His idea was that of a formula. So therefore, let us not worry that Umberto has found out the best formula or the best representation or the best model for representing knowledge. What is important and necessary is that we start so that we learn as we move forward and we come to a destination which I think will impact everyone on this planet. Let me end here because I think I have exceeded my time limit, but I would like to thank once again all of you for your patience. I hope I have made sense, but I can always tell you that I have been very excited about this project and Umberto knows it. I think it deserves to be implemented. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Ambassador Shetty. Your excitement shows. You're looking pretty good for 1 o'clock in the morning. Thank you again. So lastly, before we turn it over, on our hit list of ambassadors, let's go to Ambassador DeLuca. If you can unmute Ambassador DeLuca and make sure you are there. Vincenzo,
Yes.
Thank you. Vincenzo DeLuca is currently the ambassador of Italy to India. His career has been constantly oriented towards economic diplomacy, both in Rome at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for Economic and Cultural Promotion, and abroad in the functions of Consul General in Shanghai, delegate to the OECD in Paris. He also carried out managerial experience in the role of vice president for international institution relations at ENI and ENEL, the two most important Italian energy companies. Ambassador De Luca, if you can briefly but eloquently, I know that comes easily for you, tell us a little bit about your relationship to the GDKP.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Cole, and a special greetings and thanks to Professor Roberto Sulpasso. When he called me here in Delhi, I was enthusiastic about the support I can provide to this project of GDKP in India. And also why? Because, of course, in the relationship between Italy and India, innovation and knowledge will become more and more crucial. And in my short contribution, I would like to focus on how knowledge is affecting not only immaterial goods, but also the production of material goods. And I'm referring to what is happening in the manufacturing sector, in the current evolution of this sector, more and more based on knowledge. In the Hannover Fair 2013, it was launched a definition of this revolution in manufacturing that was called Industry 4.0. 4.0 means the fourth industrial revolution after the introduction of the steam engine in the late 18th century, the mass production in the second half of 19th century, and the ICT in the 70s of last century. The new digital technology will have a profound impact in the context of 4 guidelines. The use of data is divided in big data, open data, Internet of Things, machine to machine, cloud computing for the centralization of information and its conservation. Analytics, once the data is collected, it's necessary to derive value. Today, only 1% of the data collected is used by companies which instead could take advantage from machine learning. The interaction between man and machine, which involves touch interfaces. The whole sector that deals with the transition from digital to real, and which includes additive manufacturing, 3D printings, robotics, communication, machine-to-machine new technology for storing and using energy in a targeted way, rationalizing cost and optimizing performance. So, manufacturing industry will follow a knowledge-driven development paradigm and will increase its knowledge base. It has to invest in higher skill, interact with research institutions and digital service providers. The future of economic recovery and growth will be highly dominated by the technology, the knowledge, and the digital interconnection. And the global value chain will be affected by this revolution. The diversification and the evolution of the global value chain will require more and more knowledge contents. That explains the importance of measuring GDKP. And I would also say we could also measure maybe GDKP, not only in the national production, but in the future, maybe also in the internationalization of the economy, in the bilateral trade and investment, which is the content of knowledge in this internationalization. How the manufacturer that is more and more global with diversified regional and global value chain is based on skill and knowledge. This is very important challenge also for governments, for policymakers, and also the direction that is driven by this GDKP project is very important for measuring the future of our economy, the future of manufacturing, the future of digitalization. Thank you so much. And again, congratulations to you, Professor Cole, and very much thank to Professor Sulpasso.
Thank you, Ambassador De Luca. Hopefully there were no international crises in the last 30 minutes since we had so many ambassadors tied up on our call. So we're running a little behind. I apologize for that. We have about 6 more minutes, but just in case we lose a few people at the hour, I just want to move ahead a couple of comments that I was going to save for after Jane Kagan. But what we're trying to do in this session is whet your appetite. We want to sort of give you some so you want more. My anticipation is half the people participating will probably send a note saying, thank you, I really enjoyed that, keep me posted. And we are delighted to do that. But what we're really looking for are people who identify, who'd like to work with us conceptualizing the GDKP America, hopefully GDKP Japan, Rwanda, who are both in on this call, and can really become part of a group to help us explore the best ways to do this, because we're not set. This is an invitation to show you something we think is really compelling and to invite those who are interested to work with us, identify others, and help us move this forward. So with that said, the last part of the program, of the 4 leaders of the GDKP in America, Umberto Solpasso, Archie Kleingartner, me, you've met everybody except Jane Kagan. Let me just briefly say, although she's been indispensable to the process, that Jane Kagan throughout her career has taken a global perspective with a focus on the nexus between entertainment and education. She was an entertainment lawyer, a lot of entertainment lawyers on this call, incidentally, and a mainstream Hollywood film production executive, primarily as VP of production for producer actor Michael Douglas. At UCLA, she was the director of UCLA's Professional Entertainment Education Department, expanding a primarily local program into an international enterprise. She's consulted internationally on entertainment, digital technology, media education, to, among others, the Japanese Ministry of Economics, Trade and Industry, who was on this call, China Central Television, Paramount Pictures, Theme Parks Asia, and the countries of Ireland and the city of Cannes, France. I'd like to get in on that consulting with Cannes, France, Jane, if you can tell me how. And with that, Jane Kagan. It's my last go-to, so as long as you're there, Jane, nothing's messed up.
Okay.
Oh, great.
Thanks, Jeff. First of all, let me just say how honored I am to be with such an esteemed group. And I keep mentioning this to Umberto and Archie and Jeff. It's a pleasure to participate with such brilliant, wonderful, enlightened beings. Let me just tell you about the Solpasso Institute, which we've just initiated, and which is really a 3-pronged strategy to help support the Institute in terms of engaging internationally and creating this global community. So what I'd like to do is just introduce a few people and a few of our projects, but first I want to introduce the executive director from JETRO, which is the Japanese External Trade Organization here in Los Angeles, and a special advisor to METI, the Ministry of Economics, Trade and Industry, Norihiko Sahiki, who will just take a moment to tell you about his interest and the Japanese interest in GDKP. Norihiko, are you there?
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Okay, your computer's working. Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead, Nori.
Yeah, thank you very much for allowing me to participate in this very important conference. And my name is Norihiko Saiki. I'm executive director of JETRO Los Angeles. I originally come from the Ministry of Economy of Japan, and I think the GDKP is a very, very important notion when we think about formulating the policy about economics. Because GDKP can address the quantity, not quality of economy, and it's also provide us the foundation to think about the next generation growth for the growth. Then actually there's a huge discussion about how to complement the concept of the GDP after the financial crisis in Asia. So I think it lasts for more than 20 years. And in Japan, we discussed so many endeavors to how to complement the GDP or GDK or something replace the GDP. But I think there's no other concept so far. So I think GDKP is one of the most important influential concept for not only for the expansion of the economy, but also we would like to address the how to improve the quality of the economy itself. So I'd like to learn from a lot of things from the experiences of India and other nations. So thank you very much. So I would like to some kind of participate to keep this participation of the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Norihiko-san. I really appreciate your being able to come on today. The second part of the Sopaso Institute, the second prong to our strategy, is developing projects which elevate the intangible values that underpin Umberto's great vision. And those are values such as social justice, equity, environmental sustainability, the voices and the knowledge of indigenous people, and also of international multicultural institutions. In that regard, we are developing a project with Michael Rosen and Rosa Homan called Planet Justice. Michael, say hello.
Hello, pleasure to be here.
Rosa, if you're there, say hello. She's not on. Okay, so Planet Justice is a user-generated knowledge network, and it's focused on using social media for positive social change. And it is really being structured to be a knowledge-based enterprise. So we will keep you posted on that as we move forward. And I appreciate, Michael, that you're here on this call. The last part of the purpose of the Institute is to develop practical GDKP-centered applications. And right now, we want this to help influence economic policy discussions, both in public and private spheres. And right now, we are working with Mike Reich of Mike's Data Contours Company and Skip Newberry of the Technology Association of Oregon on a project that is US-centered, but is really global in terms of its vision. So it's a local international point of view. So what I'd like to do is turn this over to Mike and Skip to explain it more fully. Mike, are you there?
I am. Thanks, Jane. Can you hear me?
Yeah, and I can see you now, so great.
All right, excellent. Well, thanks for having us. I'll say a couple of quick things, but turn it over to Skip really quickly here. I think we're at one of these interesting opportunities and windows of opportunity with COVID, and certainly here in the United States, there's a lot of momentum around response and recovery. And one of the big challenges is how do we think about recovery from all of the economic and social impacts of the last 12 months in a way that not just rebuilds the systems and economies that we had, but also builds the capacity to address the new challenges of the 21st century. So when Jane first approached us about the concept of GDKP, it was both an interesting idea and one whose time has long since come, but also was, I think, a really strong opportunity to put it into practice to influence some of the near-term policy discussions that are going to be happening over the next few months as the United States government, federal government, and states begin to consider how they want to address recovery for COVID. So we thought it would be helpful As Jane said, we're going to be embarking on a project with a number of different organizations in Oregon. The lead is the Technology Association, and we have Skip, who is the president and CEO of the Technology Association in Oregon. Thought it would be helpful to get his perspective as sort of a practitioner and somebody who's deeply embedded in these conversations as to what the value of the GDKP is for his work. So Skip.
Thanks, Mike. And one thing that I just wanted to mention by way of background is that I used to work in economic development for the city of Portland, working specifically on things like entrepreneurship and innovation in the tech sector, and have been running a regional tech trade association, working with about 500 companies over the course of the past 9 years, and serving as a bridge between the public sector and government, private sector, namely technology, and also academic institutions with our day-to-day work. We're really focused right now on things like the increasingly mobile nature of knowledge workers. And we've done some studies in the past that have found that half of all tech employees in a traditional sense are at non-tech companies in Oregon. So that points to digital transformation that's happening in the economy. And the value that those workers create is not captured accurately in a lot of our traditional measures, right, economically. And so what I'm really intrigued by is GDKP is specifically something that we can use as a tool in our work to help educate policymakers about the impact and value of knowledge workers and companies that they work for and are creating here in the state. And as we think about the work we're doing, we're kind of a case study or microcosm of what's going on in multiple regions around the US and Canada. We're one of about 64 different regional tech associations that are doing much the same type of work and grappling with the same types of issues. And as we think about the impact of knowledge-based industries on the broader ecosystem, on the broader economy and residents, that's something that we are kind of striving for in terms of our storytelling. So what impact does the knowledge economy have on things like environmental assets, on other social justice issues? And that's something that is important because it's circular in how it ties back to increasingly mobile knowledge workers. The greater the environmental assets, the stronger a government's ability to be digital. The case study of India and their work is phenomenal. I hope one day local and state government in Oregon can aspire to even a fraction of that type of work. But that creates the stickiness that is going to grow knowledge economies and attract and retain talent that's working in those economies. So we're excited to be partnering with Jeff and the team and Jane and Mike. And if we can be helpful as a region with our work in creating an innovation plan for Oregon over the next 10 years, if this work can help inform that in a new and novel way, we'd love to be a case study.
Thanks so much, Skip. I'll turn this back to Jeff. We're really at the end, I think.
Yes, thank you, Jane. Thank you, Skip. Thank you, Mike. We do want to take some questions, but being an old teacher, I know that sometimes you lose people when you get to the Q&A period. So before we get there, and if there are enough questions, I would be delighted to arrange a follow-up session just for everybody to barrage Umberto with questions. But once again, we wanted to give you a taste of GDKP to show you the high-level support, particularly at the highest levels of the Indian government and economy for what we are doing. And we welcome those of you who want to work with us, do some planning, bring your suggestions, bring your criticisms. Everything I do in the center, I say, tell us how wonderful we are in 5 or 10 years. Right now, tell us what's wrong. Tell us the flaws. Help us before we move forward so that we can make it even better. So thank you. Thank you for almost everybody. I think we only lost about 5 people sticking with us to the end. And we'll stay online. Let's take some questions. I have not had a chance to look at the chat, but who would like to just step forward and start with some questions. But thank you again. And especially thank you to my Australian friends where it's now 6:12 in the morning, and to the Indians where it's now 1 in the morning. That's you all know the beauty of working globally. That's the burden of working globally. We're also recording this, and anybody who you think should have been here will make the recordings available. And hopefully we'll see some of you in the weeks ahead working together. So questions? Can
Yes.
we? I'm not sure. Why don't we just, unless we get into a traffic jam, why doesn't somebody just take the floor?
I'll be happy to do that, Jeff.
Okay. Is that Lindsay Connor that I'm listening to?
It is Lindsay Connor. Hello, Jeff, and hello. I'm delighted to be part of this incredible group. So I have a question for Professor Solpasso or any of the other participants. Most of us common folk hear GDP statistics about countries, and we are guided by them, and governments are guided by them. They're an enormous tool, and we know, most of us know very little about how they're calculated or who calculates them and how reliably that can be done. If we move to GDKP, which could also become a very powerful tool, we'll know a number in the end for each country. How do we know the reliability of that calculation, and who's going to do the calculation both nationally and internationally?
Umberto?
Well, thank you very much for talking from Australia.
Lindsay's in Los Angeles. Lindsay's he's a very distinguished entertainment lawyer in charge of entertainment at Manat, but he's in LA, although he may be in Palm Desert at the moment.
He's not in Australia. Oh.
No, California.
So you are in my second home.
Exactly.
Yeah, we have to find some standards in order to get it become internationally accepted. In my view, the standards will have to be derived by the techniques of GDP, because our goal at the end is to make a ratio GDP divided by GDKP. We cannot make that ratio if the techniques are not the same. We cannot divide apples by oranges. We must make all analogous. So that was the first problem I had when I was thinking of GDKP. I said, no funny things. We have to get exactly the techniques of GDP. We have to introduce new knowledge items. So, but the knowledge items we have to introduce they are included in what I call the matrix. The first matrix, the first pillar of GDKP is the knowledge production matrix of a country. In this matrix, there are the rows and the columns. The rows are all possible knowledge items that we can think, the traditional and the new ones. And the columns are the producer of the traditional and the new ones. Now what happens? I don't want to take much time, but I think this is a very important concept. We have within those rows of items some, let's make a very simple example, some digital tools. Let's say that we put a platform, digital educational platform. The digital educational platform, like any digital tool, would cost some money. And like the system we do it in GDP, we take the cost of production of that product, okay? Just analogous. But then, if the digital platform can apply to 100 people, it's different if the digital platform can apply to 100,000 people. And we have a second notion of GDKP, which is National Digital managed GDKP because we apply the coefficients. So to answer your question, you arrived right at the core of the problem. With this, you made the first fundamental question which I've been fighting when I was wanted, and the decision is very simple. We have absolutely to apply, even if they don't like it, we have to apply the same technique of GDP, except that we will apply to a larger number of knowledge items. So there will be, we'll have the standard, international standard GDKP, and that will be comparable to the GDP. So we'll make the, I'm convinced that we'll make the coefficients GDP divided by GDKP, which is what I call the Kennedy multiplier, because for affection to the Kennedy brothers. But really the first YouTube comment of Bob Kennedy is fantastic. You know, everybody should look at it because it was made 60 years ago and it's actual. But again, so we have to, what is your name? Excuse me, I miss it. I miss your name.
Oh, my name is Lindsay. Lindsay Connor.
So very, very good fundamental question. The first real question. You made the first real fundamental question. We have to absolutely observe the techniques of making the GDP, except we'll have to apply it to a larger number of knowledge items. This is, even if we don't like the techniques, it doesn't matter. But that's fundamental to make them comparable and to have the international standard GDKP. Thank you for your wonderful question.
Thank you, Lindsay. We hope we can co-opt you in, and thank you.
You got me. You got me, Jeff. I'm in.
Then you'll make sure it's reliable. All right, other questions? We'll try to get a couple in before we end the session. Any other questions?
Yes, first of all, I would like to congratulate the digital future, the Jeffrey Cole and Dr. Umberto, for bringing this wonderful initiative to, especially to India. Because as rightly told by the esteemed members here, India got knowledge. And today, if you look at globally, the top 10 company, the CEOs, out of the top 10 company, 5 company CEOs are from India. And the other advantage what we have at India is the demographic dividend, the youth. As rightly pointed by Mr. Balakrishna Shetty, we have 138 crore people. And out of that, we have closely 60% is below 35 age. So knowledge is going to change the way India is looking in coming years. As our Prime Minister vision to make our 3 trillion economy today to the 5 trillion in the next 5 years, definitely the GDKP is going to play very important role. And when I met first Professor Umberto 2 years back in Delhi, it is a love at first sight kind of a thing where I liked his idea and I'm just following, and I feel Dr. Umberto is like a Vishwa Guru. We call Vishwa Guru is a global guru. So definitely with his vision and the support from all the esteemed people, this GDKP will be a new norm across the world. And we at Vision Digital India and Imperial College are ready to support and ready to give the complete whatever required to this project. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Maram, and that support the college. Other questions or comments? It's good. I'm sorry, Ashish Kumar, who we very much wanted to get to. I apologize for everything running late. We would love to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for inviting me to this very important meeting and with the distinguished people here around. Umberto, I have been knowing for now quite some time. And we have been working. We started this work sometime in 2015 when I was heading the Central Statistics Office of India. And when he came with this idea of GDKP, and there was a lot of criticism when I called for the meeting, which he will remember, and I also remember. And Ambassador Fabian was there. I think Shetty was not there. He joined later. He was also there. And that is how this whole journey started. The earlier questioner had asked the question of reliability of GDP. Let me tell you that the GDP is compiled world over under the system of national accounts, which is the latest guidelines are 2008, which is internationally agreed guidelines. And the countries are at different stages of implementation of those guidelines. And there may be some inconsistencies across countries, but there is always a consistency within country over the period of time. So that's one thing we should note. But that always happens in the official statistics when you are talking of international comparisons. The second point, which I thought I must mention here, that when we had a discussion and we continue to discuss with Umberto and the team, that we have to follow the guidelines or the standards which are set in the system of national accounts, because then it becomes easy to establish an international standard for the GDKP. Well, there are issues. The issues are that what GDP measures is a physical, material, and services, and the total value of addition in that. But when you are actually talking of knowledge products, there has to be a subset of all the items which we are talking about with a different kind of a multiplying effect. That has to be captured. And that is the real challenge for a statistician, to sit with the economist who can always think about it, but we have to put it in practice to bring this out. And existing systems of the national statistics may not be able to capture the whole of it. So what is needed is to identify areas, identify where such knowledge products exist and how that information is being captured at present, and how it can be further supplemented from various sources, which one of the ambassadors have mentioned, that there are various sources where from the information is to be captured. I hope you're able to hear me. And that's all I thought I must share my views. And there is a need for this kind of a measure. And we think that this measure would add a lot of value to the policy making, to the decision making, and to properly give a direction to the countries where they should really invest in. So that's the idea which I fully support. And that's also a challenge to the community who is working for the GDKP, that how to measure it consistently across the countries and within the international system of compilation of GDP. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. I should have mentioned that until the end of last month, you were the head of the UN Office of Statistics. You're now back in India. I think we should keep to our schedule. Time for one more comment or question. Unless there isn't any, we still have a healthy number of participants. Anybody want to grab the floor?
Well, you know me, I will grab it no matter what. Hello.
Ruth Vitale is a dear friend as well, but a very experienced and distinguished Hollywood producer, but she now runs a coalition protecting intellectual property within Hollywood and is one of the most respected members of the Hollywood community. Ruth, and she's not shy in retiring.
No, I simply wanted to say thank you. This is something that I have never given any thought to. But everything that each one of you talked about is legitimate. We have so much knowledge and none of us really talk about how to sort of capture that. Because without that, the GDP would be nothing anyway. So to the extent that I think this is way above my pay grade, Jeff, but to the extent that I can help and my team can help, I just think it's really important. I mean, especially considering the path that our planet is taking, we need all the help we can get.
Thank you, Ruth. What a nice way to end this. Well, first of all, we should probably issue a thank you to the founders of Zoom. We couldn't, even without COVID, we couldn't have done a meeting like this all over the world. We would have all had to travel probably to New Orleans, Umberto. And also we can pat ourselves in the back for one thing. We didn't lose anybody as far as connection. We, all the transitions were relatively seamless. I'll take that. I don't want to take any credit for it. I'll just take it as a good omen. I think there is a lot more we could do with questions. I think it may make sense to do a session in a couple of weeks with Umberto and people who are in this meeting and would like to come, just to talk to him and ask questions in a smaller group. And I think we'll do that. But please,
Jeff, it's
yes.
so urgent. I just like to see, I tried to get in, but I couldn't.
Oh,
but
I'm sorry, Phil.
I'd like to tee up 2 questions for the next session, which I hope you have and I'll certainly participate in. But we have a long experience with social indicators going back to the 1960s, and that kind of bottomed out and never went anyplace. Now today we have a new movement called the donut theory of capitalism that is, that has taken root in Amsterdam and around many places in the United States and even in Asia. So I think that, and that's another effort, not so much to look at quality of life stuff like the social indicators movement, but to look at sustainability, foundational needs, and excessive needs of people. And it seems to me that all 3 of those are kind of intersecting sets with GDPK, and I think that it would be useful for just in having this spread among the social science community and the economics community to be able to show in our next session, have somebody speak to how the differences and the lessons from those 2 interventions for this one.
Thank you, Phil, and very good to see you. And we'll count you in as a participant for the next session. So thank you once again to everybody. Also, please, if there was any feedback, perhaps critical, that you didn't want to say in front of everybody else, please share with me or Jane or Archie or Umberto. Any suggestions to make this more useful. But I think we will have a follow-up session. For those, now you'll self-select, for those who want to participate. But with that, I hope everyone is staying safe. I hope 2021 is the year that we can put COVID at least very much to rest by the end of the year, and that a meeting in person, I want to meet all of these distinguished Indians and others in person. Hopefully that can happen at the end of the year. And hopefully we've stimulated your interest enough to say, I'd like to learn more. Thank you all for participating, especially thank you, Umberto, for creating the GDKP and doing the interview. Thank you to our ambassadors and to Jane and to Skip and to Mike, and hope to see, I don't want to see all of you. We do want some self-selection, but hope to see some of you in the coming weeks. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cole.
Ciao.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Hi there. Thanks for including one, Ms. Cole, Ms. Kagan, and of course, we wouldn't have been there if Professor Umberto Sulpasso was not such a great innovator. So we look forward to our continued collaboration.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.